Okay. I brought my computer because I have a little speech. You know, it's pretty weird when your PR person makes you do your own video, your own sizzle video. So, all right, so you guys, I know I'm closing. I just want to walk you a little bit down memory lane. I'm going to get into some other things. So I started, you guys look young from here, but maybe you're not all young. I started in the computer industry after I left Clorox because I was recruited away, and that was in 1983 is when I started. I joined a personal computer software company called Software Publishing as a product manager. Software Publishing's claim to fame was a product called Harvard Graphics, which was the first PowerPoint. It was the precursor to PowerPoint. In fact, I would be really not remiss at all to say Microsoft bought PowerPoint because Harvard Graphics was about a $500 million brand. Then, let's just fast forward. Here's some key dates, because I think it's really important. That was a long time ago, obviously, but Yahoo launched in 1994. Google, which is topic of many discussions, launched in 1998, 4 years later. So basically, Yahoo was obsoleted. Since Google, really, there hasn't been much. Amazon launched in 1994. They went public in 1997. I joined a company called Real.com, R-E-E-L.com, in 1998 as its CEO, and that was the first site to sell movies. It was actually bought by a company called Hollywood Entertainment. Anyone know what that is? Okay, I wouldn't think so. They went bust in 2010. They went bust in 2010 after buying Real.com to shut down the internet. They were a brick-and-mortar competitor to Blockbuster, a smaller one, but not insignificant. I got a call from Reed Hastings at the time, and he said, "How long do I have before they come after me?" I said, "Maybe 20 years." All right, so needless to say, a lot's changed. I did run pets.com, and I did found the RealReal from my house in 2011. Needless to say, I've been in e-commerce a long time. In fact, you guys were probably in grade school when I started. And we've heard all day long how uncertain the business climate is. It is incredibly uncertain. If I look in the fashion industry, the only winners in Q1 were Shein and Hermes. Even LVMH was down 9%. So you had a very high-end brand and a very low-end brand. This is before the tariffs. But everything was underwater besides that. So here's the fascinating thing. When I think about e-commerce, and again, I've been in it a long time, a lot of progress in fraud, a lot of progress in moving to the cloud. It's actually much more efficient to start a company. It's much easier. When I started, you had to write every piece of code for every single thing, and everyone was writing the same code and all these different companies. Now you can actually get a site up pretty quickly. But let's be real, there hasn't been a lot of innovation. I mean, I stood up here and heard, I was in the back hearing the woman from Forrester talking about you better embrace mobile. I mean, like, my head almost blew up. So there hasn't been a lot of innovation. I am a big online shopper, and yet I still have to go up. I'm a repeat customer. I shop about 6 apparel places constantly and have been for a very long time, and then other specialty goods when I need them. I still have to go up and filter. I still have to go up and search, and yet I'm a repeat customer, and some of these for as long as 15 years. Think about that. It's absolutely insane. Let me just go through this. The other thing that I find really frustrating, if I want to go to a store, and I'm going to talk mostly about fashion, I'll look online, and then I'll call the store and say, "I found these things. Do you have it in the store?" They'll say, "No, but I can order it for you, or you can have it shipped to your home." I don't want it shipped to my home. I actually want to try it in on the store. I want to talk to a salesperson. I have to get things altered. Now, this is an easy problem. Let me give you a data point. When I left the RealReal 2 years ago, we were bringing into the warehouse between 600,000 and 800,000 unique SKUs every month. Unique SKUs every single month. A normal retailer will have anywhere from 30,000 to 120,000 for the year. Every one of those SKUs had the opportunity to be in one of the 17 stores. If it's sold in the store, it automatically shows for sale on the website. You can filter by the store, and it's 100% accurate. This is not a hard problem to solve, and yet, I don't know if you're an Instacart or a DoorDash user, I would say 20 to 25% of the items I order are out of stock. When I call any boutique and I look at their website, there's about 30% chance that item's in the store. This is, you talk about not trying to help your customers. It's an easy technical problem to solve. If the RealReal can solve it, bringing in 600,000 to 800,000 unique products every single month, you guys can solve it with your SKU set. So that's the first point. The other thing that I think, and I know you've heard a lot about AI, I hope you are using it in multiple ways. It is great. But what I didn't hear, and what I haven't heard at all, is how you are using it on your return customers. So I don't know if you saw, does anyone read the information? I would read that. It's a pub on tech. They were just talking about AI-induced shopping bots yesterday and how the ones that go across and shop the internet are sort of failing. Well, of course they're failing. That is a very hard problem to solve. It's going to take a long time. But if I'm a return customer and you know who I am, you can set up, I'm going to use fashion as an example. If I say I want, and you should be able to talk into your phone, say, hello, I'm going to an event, I need a black dress, I need some accessories, when can I see when is my dressing room going to be ready? The dressing room can be ready online within seconds. Within seconds, because they know me. They know my size, they have my styles. They should be able to pull, and they know my price points. They should be able to pull something together as a virtual dressing room. And more importantly, if I do want to go in the store, the sales associate should have that same thing on their phone, and they should actually then throw in other things that are more interesting. Now, is this a hard problem to solve? No, it's not. Should it be your top priority? The RealReal's repeat rate when I left was 85%. We never made $1 on the first order. We made all our money on the repeat, and most people make their money on repeat. So I would say if you're trying to increase your retention rate and your conversion rate, which is still about 3% for everyone, you need to focus on how you win with that returning customer. And it's really not that hard. Just to give you some ideas, the RealReal's been using Picture ID for a long time. We've been using machine learning for authentication for a long, long time. We write copy. We've been writing copy off that picture for at least 4 or 5 years. Humans oversee it. Taking that to a new level, we know what people bought. Now, the RealReal isn't going to employ this because they have 100% sell-through in less than 90 days. But they should look at it because at some point, the retailers who are going to address their return customers, are going to use AI to actually give them an experience that's meaningful, and they are going to inject a human in there. But the disconnect between retail and online, the disconnect between a returning customer, because I have to tell you, my first searches, if I can't find something in a retailer, I leave, and most people do too. And if I can't find someone across all retailers, I'm just like, okay, this is too much of my time. It's too hard to shop. And then, just to give you another thing, all right, I really believe this is the most unique time you're going to have. Things are going to get bad. It's going to be a really hard time. But if you stay where you are, you will be left behind. Right now, the way we were using AI and the way the company continues to use AI at the RealReal, it was all cost savings, and it was real cost savings. But the way AI is going to be used in the future is not making the next best you may also like. It's actually using it creatively, where you talk into your phone, you get your products that you want, especially as a repeat customer. And then you can move forward. I guarantee you someone's going to do it. And it's not going to be a plug-and-play operation that comes to you with this technology, because you have the data. No one else has that data. So if you're waiting for an outside technology company to solve this, you might get there partway. But if you build up your own data mining, data scientists with great product people, you're going to be able to move forward in a really exciting, aggressive way. And I haven't seen it. I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. And listening to the woman in Forrester figuring out returns, that's table stakes. That is absolutely table stakes. It's not innovation. It's an accounting, math, finance problem. And it's an important problem because I know it does stop sales. But it's not a way to win. It's not a way to win at all. It's a table stake problem. You can test your way into it, but at the end of the day, it's a math problem and it's a finance problem. But there are much bigger ways, and the opportunities are the biggest since I've seen things happen. Since we talk about, when I started, significant platform changes. When I started in the industry, you had to pick which DOS you were going to code to. You had to have multiple printer drivers. You had a whole team that's all they did, was code to different operating systems, and you had to pick the right ones. Once that stabilized, everything took off. Then we had the internet, and companies either mapped to the internet or they didn't. That was the next big one. Then we have AI. Having worked with a lot of retailers outside of the RealReal, I can tell you, you guys are a laggard business, and it's not going to serve you. It's not going to serve you, and it was okay when things were going well, but things aren't going to go well. You need to embrace technology. You need to embrace AI, and you really need to take care of your returning customers first, because you have the data. So that's really all I have to talk about, because I have to leave time for questions if anyone has any questions. None? Oh, come on.
All right, I'm here. Sorry. That was RealReal.
That was RealReal.
All right, everybody, come on. We have questions here for Julie. All right, here we go.
Hi. What was your biggest challenge?
For the RealReal?
Yes.
So one of the beauties of being in Silicon Valley, and place matters, is there are people that fund startups. All right? So it's a place of innovation. They fund startups. One of the problems with being in Silicon Valley, well, it's still a great place for funding startups. Women get less than 2% of all capital. And then I had pets.com on my shoulder, sort of loomed large. So then everyone says, oh, Silicon Valley loves failure. No one loves failure. So I had this big looming puppet. was female over 50 when I started my business. It was always raising capital, always raising capital. And, you know, I get it, because at the end of the day, you get a lot more no's than you get yeses. So if you talk to 100 people, all you need is one to say yes. Hopefully it's a good VC. But it's also a place where eBay originated. A lot of the people in the venture capital world came from eBay. And every time I'd walk in, they'd say, you know what, eBay does what you do. It doesn't matter. Now, I was already at $10 million in sales when I went out to raise capital. It took one yes, and it was from a female VC. And then another female VC said yes, and then a European VC said yes. And I had my $10 million round, my first round. But it was always hard. It's always hard to raise capital. It was particularly hard because this was a novel concept. I remember going to one venture cap. This is this is a long answer, but it's sort of funny. Going to one venture capitalist who put his foot on the table when and he said, "Do you see this shoe?" I'm like, "Yes, it's on your foot." You know, you don't really want to be rude, but it really was on his foot. And he said, "I've had this shoe for 5 years. What do you think about that?" And I said, "I don't think you're my customer." And anyway, it was a bad meeting. I sort of shut my computer down and left at that time. But a month later, he funded ThreadUp. So there was something else going there. So, you know, I mean, I've got 1 million of those. That's one of the most demonstrative, because first of all, it was an ugly shoe. And it was brown, and it had dirt on it. So, you know, you wanted to say, you know, you might be okay with getting new shoes. And anyway, my site wasn't the RealReal shoe site. It was RealReal. The other thing is, again, this is where place matters. Silicon Valley and luxury goods is almost a null set unless it's technology. And then it's absolutely the top, always the top. But I have never seen anyone in Silicon Valley walk in with a designer thing on. What they're walking, they have their suits. It was khakis and vests for a while. It sort of still is. And occasionally they'll wear it, you know, something really racy, like a cap that's different. And maybe it'll be a Laura piano, which costs them $400. But it's not really their thing. So always raising money. And I think that's to be honest, that's every entrepreneur's problem. It's harder. It's just a lot harder for women. Otherwise, you wouldn't have less than 2% of the capital. But anyway, I've got a lot of good stories about not just that, but also about counterfeiters. But
Okay,
yes.
I got a question over here.
Yes.
Hi, Julie. It's really interesting hearing your perspective on how e-commerces have changed over the years, and what are the emerging technologies people need to adopt. Obviously, AI is chief among them. But what do you think about crypto and businesses adapting to crypto payments, accepting them, or facilitating them?
You know, it's just not mainstream. You guys aren't even getting your table stakes right. Look, I just think it's another form of payment. If you're in the crypto business, you're in the crypto business. But for mainstream, I think Starbucks embraced it first. They're like, oh, we have crypto. I'd love to see how much that moved their bottom line. It's like a nice press release. It's really a non-starter unless you're really in that business. But for a general retailer e-commerce, it's a snoozer, and it's got to be one of your last priorities.
Okay, Natasha.
Hi, Julie. Thank you.
Where are you?
Oh, hi. I'm over here.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Hi.
My name is Stephanie. Thank you for speaking with us today so directly and honestly. I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about how you jumped from exclusively e-com to an e-com and brick and mortar mix.
Oh, you know what? That's a really good one. So a couple different things happened. The RealReal was a new category maker, which is hard to do, and it never had been done before. And a couple different things had to happen, and they're intertwined. But one is the products we had in the warehouse were blow your mind beautiful. The quality was beyond what people could have imagined. And we demanded it because we have a sales team that goes to people's homes. Ideally, we wouldn't have a rejection of a product, but we did reject things for condition, and obviously for if they were counterfeit or they weren't in our brand list. So we had all these criteria. But when you have these beautiful things and you're trying to change perception, then we're like, well, what if we open a store? We'll do a pop-up first. Let's do a pop-up. Let's open a store, and so people can see the merchandise. And then the question is, we'll just test it. We'll test it someplace. Where do you test it? Well, it was 2017. Decided we needed to test it in New York City. Why? And I'll tell you, this is really important. The other thing is we had the biggest selection of men's watches and the most amazing fine jewelry. So I knew that there was no natural buyer for the company. I also knew I'd taken money in 2012, and at some point I was going to have to get my investors out. It looked like we were going to have to go public. And if we went public, given the fact that men really didn't get it, and yet everyone in the investment community is a man, we thought we really need to open a store for our consumers, but also so we can bring people in Wall Street through the store, so they can see the product, they can see the buzz of the store. So the first thing we did was a pop-up in Soho. Soho's close to the financial district. And the pop-up, we decided to do the pop-up in September of 2017. We executed that in November 15th, 2017, which is a startup mode. When we did that, we were swamped. I was there most days. I have to tell you a big mistake we made, which was really, like, when you think about it, you'll be like, why would you even think that? But we didn't think about it right. So anyway, we had tons of buyers, so many that we immediately started looking for space in the neighborhood for a permanent store. What I didn't realize was that store was also going to be a collection for consignment. We didn't have the ability, I mean, obviously we did. We weren't going to say, no, take it home. But we didn't set up an area for consignment coming in. And yet that was a normal pattern that people had been doing. So we had the next, when we planned the next store in Soho, we actually developed a whole area to take consignment, which has since been enlarged. Just to give you a data point on how successful these stores are, I'm going to give you one in LA. This is pre-COVID. It's now sort of back to that, although I don't have the latest data because I did leave there 2 years ago. We have a store on Melrose in West Hollywood, and that opened, I think, about 2018. That store, when I left, was doing $100 million in merchandise value, $50 million in sales, and $50 million in consignment coming in the door. So we opened stores for one reason, to give people a view of what the product quality was, and also to be, so we could walk men through it, and we had a pretty large men's section at the time, so they understood the product when we got ready to go public. It turned out to be a phenomenal source for consignment, and the other thing I didn't mention, but I think it's really critical, the RealReal is completely data-driven. It has been from the beginning, and we set up the database right so you can go deep into the taxons. And so what that means is we could measure the effectiveness on the total business in New York of opening one store and seeing the lift. And it's been written about, it's nothing new when people open a store, but the average sales price went up, the engagement with the brand went up. It lifted the New York area, one store, by 10% in 6 months. So it was a phenomenal lift and high average selling price and a huge source of consignment. But it all started from one simple idea. We have great merchandise, no one understands it, and the financial world will never understand this. And then the question is, how far do you go? Now, this is why if you go up to the RealReal, you still have to filter. But the other thing is, if you put your our customer base was the consignor and the buyer. The consignor was always more important than the buyer because supply was our baby. That's how we made our money. If you put that item in the store and you don't have visibility on the sales, and you don't want it to be landlocked, because if you're lucky, you're going to get 400, well, the RealReal does more than that, but you get 400 people a week in that store, it becomes a nightmare for the business and a nightmare for the consignor, which means you had to have sync. Every SKU is unique in the RealReal, and you have to have sync with what's online and what's in the store. And that's why we did that code, which actually was pretty difficult. But that means that we always know where all products are at all times, but still with that, and still with that scalable volume. So that was a long answer, but it made a huge difference.
Yes, it did. We have time for one final question.
I'm sorry, I have 2 questions.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I was your customer, so I am so glad to hear you speak. Thank you so much for coming today to speak to us. My first question is related to counterfeits, which I think are that's probably one of your biggest challenges. So, when you were with the RealReal, if you think back to the different milestones from a tech stack perspective, how did you handle counterfeit product?
This is a great question. So one of the coolest things about taking pictures of everything was we could switch up the system and take pictures of the counterfeits. So at the beginning, when you're small, it really was keeping the counterfeits as a training tool and pulling the people that authenticated the products together and then having daily updates. And so it became very manual, and it's still manual for high-end goods because counterfeiters move very, very quickly. But if you think about, and there's always counterfeits flowing in, so just roughly, let's say 5% of the products coming in are counterfeit, which is probably an overstatement because what happens with counterfeit goods once we determine they're counterfeit, those products are confiscated and held. And a true counterfeiter who makes their business as a counterfeiter always has a brother who's a lawyer somewhere, probably in Florida, and that brother will sue you. I wish this wasn't a one-off. This happened time and time again, always in Florida, always a brother. That brother will sue you for returning those goods. And if you don't return the goods, even though it's clearly stated in the policy, that brother may send thugs to the CEO's house late at night to pound on the door. So that happened once. It only happened once. Or they may have their wife call you and say, we're in the same business. Come on, give me the products back. But to answer a serious question here, when you take pictures of counterfeit goods, and then you have that as the set, but more importantly, you know what a good looked like. There's 2 different things that happen when goods come into the RealReal. Individual counterfeiters, and even vendor counterfeiters are different. The company does about 10% of their products in vendors. Individual counterfeiters have a pattern. That pattern, the company's been in business now 14 years. That pattern's pretty easy to identify. Those people that have suspicious first consignor patterns go into a swim lane that actually gets different attention. So that's all done at the receiving docks. They're flagged, they go in a different swim lane. The other thing is the products, the first pass, especially in the handbags, for almost all handbags, is run through quick recognition of a key. So it goes to a person, they take a few pictures, it's flagged go, most likely good, or caution. If it goes to caution, it goes to the human. Now, that work happens over and over and over again. The other thing in the jewelry department is much more sophisticated than that because for instance, I've got some Cartier bangles. They have the same percentage of nickel in them every single time. One deviation at all, it is then automatically put in the counterfeit lane. So having different machines that can analyze with all that institutional knowledge and years of doing this, and certain things like Cartier doesn't change their mix. Now, having said that, back to handbags, which are the most lucrative, counterfeiters are really, really good and they keep doing it. And it wasn't unusual to find an Hermes bag, which can sell for $40,000 to $100,000. Most are around 20, but they can be quite pricey, to have real Birkin bag parts on it, but the rest was fake. And that was identified first through pictures, then humans. It's one of those things that makes the difference in trust versus not trust, and it gets elevated by technology and then human knowledge and human sharing of the knowledge. It's a lot.
All right, with that, let's give her a very big round of applause, Julie. Congratulations on your success. And my only question is, do you have the Pets.com sock puppet?
I have the original Pets.com sock puppet, and sadly, my dog thought it was a stuffed thing and ripped the his little announcer mic off him, but it's okay. It was just taped on him, so he's okay.
All right.